If you've ever been curious about the difference between an engineering internship, a co-op, working full-time, or working as a graduate student for a company, well, here's some about Dr. Megan Pollock's journey as she worked for Texas Instrument as an intern, a co-op, and then as a graduate student and also full-time. Compare the co-op during your undergrad and then after your master's and before you finish the degree. And then once you finish the degree and you went back in October, like what did it look like? What type of work were you doing at those three different, like major different milestones?
So the internship I actually had two internships during my undergrad. I had a 2-month one. So it was a summer internship between my first and second year of college. And that one was very different because they actually called it an internship. The others were all actually called co-ops. So the internship meant like, basically they gave me a seat and it was my job to like learn and explore as much as I could in 2 months. And I did have a project and the person I worked for was Ted Thomas. He's still a friend of mine today. I remember like, he gave me his novel, he wrote a novel and, he's been a big part of my life, but the project I did there was a market gap analysis study. And so, I looked at like the pricing curves and did a bunch of data tables. And so that was fun. And then the second internship I had was a 10-month internship that I negotiated on my own. And that was in Tucson. So I went out to Tucson for 10 months. Again, not what my advisors wanted me to do, but I had started college with 29 hours. And so the pace I was on, I was going to graduate in like 2.5 years.
Wow.
And I was like, I don't want to graduate in 2.5 years, like I want to have more college. And so I had this 10-month internship and then I came back for 1 semester and then graduated still in 3.5 years. So advice on internships, make sure you have a project because that 10-month one, I worked, but actually don't know what I did because like there wasn't a project. I made some lifelong friends, but you should always have a project for an internship. Now, the Texas Tech internship, my project was my master's thesis. And so I studied the permeation and diffusion of moisture into the headspace of the digital micromirror device. And then I continued that work as a full-time engineer. And I was a product engineer. So the difference between the intern, the co-op, and then being a full-time employee is that I was officially a product engineer. So even though my degree is electrical, a product engineer means they had these portfolio of digital micromirror devices and they all had, different specs. And I owned a portion of the portfolio in the sense that I was responsible for production, all the manufacturing issues, quality control, as it handed off from the designers to the customer. So we handled that whole middle process. And so I was on the phone, like 3 nights a week with Malaysia and Singapore, because that's where we were like producing things. I think that's where they were. Maybe Philippines. I don't remember. I just remember like I had 10 p.m. phone calls and then had to be at work at 8 a.m.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, loads of fun. And so managing those devices. So it was just different because the shift from being a student to being an employee, like you lose some of that cyclical nature of like finishing things.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that being really hard of like, nothing's ever finished, like I needed that sense of like, I need to be able to be done with something. And so that was a really hard transition for me, but you adapt and you learn.
Yeah. I remember like transitioning, like thinking that when I was a student, everything's gonna be like design process, so you're like, everything's gonna be just like design, go through the whole process. You're doing all these testing, you do have a prototype and then you'll do production. And it was just like in my head, like you're saying, like the finish, you wanted like the start to the end, but then all of a sudden it's like different. You're like, oh, like this is different than what I thought it would be. Do you think, I don't know, like, is that something that would be like a change that needs to happen in education to address that? Or like training that needs to happen at a company? Like, how do you deal with that?
That's a good question. I remember having this conversation with one of like my boss's boss, and because she had actually gone through the same program at Texas Tech. And I think she advised me to like find ways that I could feel that sense of completion.
Mm-hmm.
And so, whether it be different side projects I was working on, because, we were still trying to make everything better, faster, smaller,
Yeah.
cheaper, all these things. So like to find those different things and to just learn how to celebrate milestones of like along the way. So I don't know if it's something you can really, I think you can certainly equip students with realizing like, hey, life isn't going to run from, August to December anymore.
Right. That too.
You have to have like, you have to learn how to sort of adapt in that. And I think that's just part of moving into the workforce. But I do remember Amy, is her name, Amy Pedraza, telling me that of just like, you just got to find the things that you can sort of measure and track and celebrate those milestones.
I like that.